The market was noisy that day, full of traders shouting prices, machines humming, and footsteps echoing across the dusty colony streets. Humans and aliens moved side by side, buying food, tools, and water. Some were laughing, some were fighting over small deals. But among all this noise, one small figure moved slowly. Weakly, it was an alien woman. Her clothes torn, her eyes tired, her skin looked pale, stretched thin from hunger, and in her arms, a small girl clung to her side. The girl was no older than 7. Her face was thin, her cheeks hollow, and her lips dry. She had not eaten in days. Her eyes looked lost, too weak even to cry. The mother held her close, whispering softly, "Hold on, my little one." Just a little more, she had begged before. But no one cared. Most traders pushed her away, calling her useless. Some even laughed at her, saying she should work or die. But she had nothing left to sell, nothing left to give except herself. That day she saw him, a human trader, tall and broad-shouldered, standing near his supplies. His clothes were simple, his face weathered. He looked like someone who had traveled far and fought many battles. He was not smiling, but there was strength in his eyes. The mother's heart raced. She had seen how people respected humans in this colony. They were known for their power, their wealth, their ability to survive in hard places. Maybe, just maybe, this one would help. Her daughter tugged weakly at her sleeve, whispering, "Mama, I'm hungry." The words broke her heart into pieces. She couldn't bear it anymore. She had to try, even if it meant losing everything. She walked slowly toward the human, her knees trembling. Her voice shook as she spoke. "Please, sir, please feed my daughter. She hasn't eaten in days." The human looked at her, his face calm, unreadable. His eyes dropped to the child, who clung tightly to her mother's side, too tired even to stand on her own. The mother swallowed hard, her shame burning inside her. She knew what she had to say next. Her voice cracked, but she forced the words out. "Take me. Just feed my daughter." The words hung heavy in the air. People nearby turned their heads. A few gasped, others smirked. They had heard many things in this market, but even here such a desperate bargain was rare. The human didn't move. He didn't speak right away. He just stared at her. The silence made her heart pound. Had she angered him? Did he think she was filthy, worthless? She lowered her head, ashamed. Her hands shook as she held her daughter tighter. Tears filled her eyes. "Please, she's just a child," she whispered. "Don't let her die hungry. I will give you myself. I will do whatever you ask. Only feed her." The crowd began to whisper. Some laughed cruelly. "Look at her begging like that," one alien said. Another chuckled. The human should take the offer. Why not? But others were silent, uneasy. The sight of a mother ready to give away her life for her daughter struck even the coldest hearts. The little girl opened her eyes weakly. Her small voice whispered, "Mama, don't cry." She reached a tiny hand to wipe her mother's tears. That broke the silence even more. Some of the onlookers looked away. Unable to meet the child's eyes, the human finally moved. He shifted his stance, crossing his arms. His eyes stayed on the mother. Studying her, he saw the dirt on her skin, the hopelessness in her eyes, the trembling of her body, and yet beneath all that he saw her strength. The strength of a mother willing to give everything for her child. Still, he didn't answer right away. His silence was heavier than words. The mother shook, thinking he was going to refuse. Her knees buckled and she nearly fell to the ground, clutching her daughter to her chest. The whispers around them grew louder. The market had stopped for this moment. Traders, buyers, and strangers all watched the scene unfold. The question hung in the air like a blade. Would the human accept? The mother lifted her head again. Her eyes red with tears, she whispered one last time, her voice trembling with fear and shame. "Please take me. Just feed my daughter." And in that moment, everything in the market seemed to freeze. The mother's last words floated in the air like a broken prayer. "Please take me. Just feed my daughter." The market had gone strangely quiet. Even the usual shouting of prices and clatter of goods seemed to fade. All eyes turned toward the human, waiting for his response, but the human said nothing. He stood tall, his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the woman and child. His face gave away nothing, no anger, no pity, no laughter, just silence. The mother trembled under his stare. Her knees felt weak, her shame growing heavier with every heartbeat. She thought he was disgusted with her. She thought he would turn away. Like so many others had, the silence crushed her. It was worse than rejection, worse than cruelty. The little girl tugged at her mother's sleeve, whispering weakly, "Mama, let's go." Her voice was soft, almost fading. It broke something inside the mother's heart. She could not walk away, not yet. Not when there was still a chance. The onlookers grew restless, some chuckled quietly, waiting for the human to laugh. "He'll take the deal," one alien whispered. "Humans are rough, they always take what they want," another said. "He's just enjoying the show." But still the human said nothing. His silence stretched longer and longer. The mother clutched her daughter tightly, her tears dripping onto the girl's thin shoulder. She felt her hope slipping away with every second. Why didn't he answer? Why didn't he speak? The silence made her desperate. She tried again, her voice cracking. "She is just a child, please, I don't care about myself, just give her food, please." The human's eyes narrowed slightly, but still he did not move. He watched her, studied her, as if weighing something no one else could see. The mother lowered her head in shame. Her voice was now a whisper. "If you hate me, then punish me, but please, don't let her starve." The girl's small hands tried to wipe her mother's tears again. "Mama, don't cry," she whispered. Her innocence made the silence even heavier. Some of the crowd looked away. Unable to meet her eyes, others leaned closer. Hungry for the drama? The human finally shifted, unfolding his arms. His movements were slow, deliberate. His boots scraped against the dirt as he stepped closer. The mother flinched, expecting him to grab her, to claim her, but he didn't. He stopped in front of them, looking down at the child. His silence was no longer cold, it was sharp, filled with something unspoken. The girl blinked up at him, too weak to even move away. The human crouched slightly, bringing his face closer to theirs. The mother held her breath, her body shaking. She expected words of scorn, or maybe cruel laughter, but still he said nothing. Instead, his eyes locked with hers, and for a brief moment, she saw something unexpected. Pain, deep pain, hidden behind his silence. It was not the face of a man enjoying her humiliation. It was the face of someone remembering something heavy. The silence stretched so long that even the crowd grew uneasy. Whispers began to die, replaced by a strange tension. It was no longer just about a trade. It was about something else, something bigger. Finally, the human spoke, his voice low, calm and steady. "No." The mother froze. Her heart dropped. She thought he was refusing her plea completely. She bowed her head lower, ready to collapse in despair. But before she could move, he spoke again. "I don't trade lives for food," he said firmly. His eyes never leaving hers, the words stunned her. Stunned the crowd for a second. No one understood what he meant. The whispers rose again, confused, shocked. "What is he saying?" Someone muttered. "Is he refusing her? Is he mocking her?" The mother's tears fell faster. She thought she had lost everything, but there was something in his voice, something steady, unshaken, that kept her from walking away. The human stood back up slowly, his silence returning, but now it was different. It wasn't the silence of cruelty. It was the silence of a storm about to break. The mother stared at him, confused, trembling. Her lips moved, but no words came. She didn't understand. Why had he refused? Why had he spoken like that? The little girl leaned against her, her small body heavy with exhaustion. Her eyes stayed on the human, innocent and searching. The crowd waited, breathless. They didn't know what the human would do next. They only knew this story was not over, and in that moment, the mother realized his silence was not rejection. His silence was something else, something she could not yet name. The crowd leaned closer, waiting. Their whispers swirled like smoke in the hot air of the market. The alien mother clutched her child, trembling. The girl's head rested weakly against her shoulder, almost too tired to keep her eyes open. The human's words still echoed. "I don't trade lives for food." The mother thought she had failed. Her lips trembled as she whispered, Then you refuse us?" Her voice cracked with pain. She felt shame, defeat, and the fear of watching her daughter fade before her eyes. But the human's voice came again. Low and steady, "Yes, I refuse," he said, pausing just long enough to let the words sink deep. The crowd gasped, some shook their heads, some laughed cruelly. "See? He's no different," one alien muttered. The mother closed her eyes, ready to collapse. Her knees buckled as she held her daughter tighter. She had begged, she had offered everything, and still he refused. But then his voice cut through the whispers, sharper this time. "I refuse, because I don't buy people." The words stunned her. She opened her eyes, her breath catching. She looked up at him, confused. His face was stern, not cruel. His eyes burned with something deeper. The crowd grew silent again, their whispers fading. They hadn't expected this. They had expected him to laugh or to take the bargain, but this was different. The human took a slow step forward. His shadow stretched over the mother and child. He crouched down again, his voice softer now, but still heavy with power. "Your daughter will eat, not because I bought you, but because no child should starve," the mother gasped, her tears falling faster. She shook her head in disbelief. You would help us without taking?" The human's jaw tightened. His silence returned for a moment, then he said, "I won't take what you offered because that's not help, that's cruelty. And I've seen enough cruelty in my life." He stood tall again, his presence filling the space. His voice rose slightly, enough for the watching crowd to hear. "I will not be the kind of man who feeds a child by stealing a mother's dignity." The market fell into stunned silence. Some passengers lowered their heads, ashamed of their earlier laughter. Others looked uneasy, shifting on their feet. The human's words cut through them like a blade. The mother held her daughter tighter, her lips trembling. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would you do this? Why would you care?" The human's eyes softened, just for a moment. "Because once, long ago, I watched someone I loved beg in the same way, and no one helped her. I swore I'd never let it happen again." The mother's breath caught in her chest. She wanted to speak, but no words came. Her tears fell quietly, soaking into her daughter's hair. The little girl stirred weakly, her small hand reaching out. Her fingers brushed against the human's rough hand. She whispered with the little strength she had left, "Food, please." The human didn't hesitate. He reached into his pack, pulling out a ration bar and a water flask. He knelt down and placed them gently in the child's hands. Guiding her to eat slowly, the girl took a small bite, then another. Her eyes widened as life seemed to return to her face. The mother covered her mouth with her hand, sobbing quietly. It was the first time she had seen her daughter eat without fear in days, maybe weeks. The crowd watched in silence, their earlier cruelty swallowed by shame. None of them had lifted a finger to help. They had only watched, waiting for humiliation, and yet this human, this stranger, had done what none of them dared. The human straightened again, his voice calm but firm. "I refuse your bargain," he repeated, "because you and your daughter deserve more than scraps, more than survival. You deserve dignity, you deserve a future." The words struck deeper than anything she had expected. The mother bowed her head low, her tears dripping onto the dirt. I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. The human shook his head slowly. "Don't thank me, just live. That's enough." And with that, he turned slightly, motioning for her to follow. His silence had changed now. It was no longer cold or heavy. It was purposeful, full of promise. The crowd parted as he walked. The mother, still clutching her daughter, stumbled after him. Her heart pounded with confusion, fear and hope all at once. She didn't know where he was leading them, but for the first time in years, she felt like the road ahead wasn't darkness. The crowd whispered behind them, not with laughter this time, but with wonder. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others muttered in awe. A human refused power and gave kindness instead. No one there would forget the moment the bargain was refused. And yet somehow, it gave more than it ever could have taken. The market's noise slowly returned. But it was different now. The shouting of traders seemed softer, the laughter uneasy. Everyone had seen what happened. Everyone had heard the human's words, but no one dared to stop him as he walked. The mother followed him, still clutching her daughter. Her legs trembled, and her heart raced with confusion. She couldn't understand. She had offered herself, and he had refused. Instead, he had fed her child. Now he was leading them away from the crowd, away from the eyes that judged. The little girl clung to her mother's shoulder, her lips stained with crumbs from the ration bar. She looked a little brighter now, her eyes less heavy. Her small hand gripped her mother's torn clothing tightly as they followed the human through the colony streets. The mother's voice shook as she finally spoke. Why are you helping us?" Her words were quiet, almost afraid of the answer. The human didn't stop walking. His steps were steady, his voice calm. "Because no one else would," she blinked. Stunned by the simplicity of it, his words cut straight through her heart. They were not wrapped in fancy promises. They were not part of some bargain, they were just truth. He led them to the edge of the colony. where the noise of the market faded into silence. There, standing between the rusted buildings, was a small shelter, metal walls patched and repaired, a place that looked lived in but strong. The human pushed open the door, stepping aside so they could enter. The mother hesitated, her body stiff. She had expected to be taken somewhere dark, somewhere cruel. Instead, when she stepped inside, she found warmth. The shelter was simple, but inside there was a fire pit with a soft flame burning, a table with tools neatly arranged, and shelves with food supplies stacked in careful order. It wasn't rich, but it was safe. Her daughter stirred, her eyes widening at the sight of the fire and food. The human set down his pack. Pulling out more rations, he placed them on the table, then filled a cup of water and handed it to the girl. The child drank greedily, water dripping down her chin. The mother hurried to wipe her mouth, whispering, "Slowly, my love, slowly." Tears streamed down her face as she watched her child drink freely for the first time in days. The human crouched, his rough hands steady as he opened another food packet and placed it in front of them. "Eat," he said simply. The mother hesitated, her pride fighting against her hunger. But the smell of food filled the air, and her daughter looked at her with wide, pleading eyes she couldn't refuse, not now. She broke off a piece, handing it to her little girl first. Then with trembling hands she took a bite herself. Warmth spread through her chest as the food touched her stomach. It wasn't just nourishment, it was hope. She lowered her head, her voice breaking. Why would you give us this? Why would you bring us here? You owe us nothing." The human's eyes softened, but his voice remained steady. "Because you deserve more than survival. You deserve dignity, and no one should have to beg for their child's life." The words hit her like a wave. Her tears fell harder. She covered her face, ashamed and grateful at the same time. The little girl tugged at the human's sleeve, her tiny voice soft. "Thank you." The human froze for a moment. His eyes flickered as if the words had struck something deep inside him. He gave a small nod, his voice low. "You're welcome." The mother lifted her head, her lips trembling. I thought you would take me. I thought that was the only way." The human shook his head slowly. "I've seen too much taken already. I don't need to take more." His voice was heavy, carrying shadows of his past, but he said no more. For the first time in years, the mother felt something stir in her chest. Safety. She looked around the small shelter, her daughter's smile returning as she ate, the warmth of the fire filling the room. This was not what she had expected. She had expected cruelty. She had expected her body to be traded for a scrap of food. Instead, she had been given shelter, dignity, and kindness. The human stood crossing his arms, watching them quietly. His silence was no longer frightening. It was steady, protective, like a wall shielding them from the world outside. The mother whispered softly, almost to herself, Maybe there is still goodness left." And in that moment, she realized this was not a bargain anymore. It was something far greater, something she never thought she would find again. The fire crackled softly inside the shelter, throwing warm light across the metal walls. The little girl sat curled on a blanket, her small hands clutching the last of the ration bar. For the first time in days, her face was brighter, her cheeks a little less pale. She giggled quietly as she sipped water, the sound like music to her mother's ears. The mother sat beside her, her hands shaking as she stroked her daughter's hair. She still couldn't believe what had happened. She had begged, offered everything, and instead of shame, she had been given food, water, and safety. Her eyes turned toward the human. He sat near the fire, sharpening a blade with steady hands. His face was calm, but there was something heavy in his eyes, something that spoke of old pain. He hadn't said much since bringing them here. His silence filled the room, but it wasn't cruel anymore. It felt like silence with weight, silence that carried memories. The mother's voice was quiet, almost afraid to break the peace. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you refuse me when others would not have?" The human stopped sharpening for a moment. His hand froze on the blade. He stared into the fire, its reflection flickering in his eyes. For a long time, he said nothing. The mother lowered her head, thinking he would ignore her, but finally his voice came low and steady. "Because I've seen that bargain before." The words made her breath catch. She looked at him, waiting. He didn't look back at her. His eyes stayed on the fire. He continued, his tone heavy. "Long ago, in another place, someone I loved was desperate. Just like you, hungry, broken, begging for her child to live. She made the same offer you made to me. She gave herself away because no one helped her. And I watched it destroy her. The mother's heart tightened. Her hands clutched her daughter closer. The fire crackled louder in the silence that followed. The human's jaw clenched, his voice grew sharper. I swore that day I would never let it happen again. I swore I would never stand by and watch a mother be forced to choose between her dignity and her child's life. He set the blade down, his eyes finally meeting hers. They were dark, filled with sorrow but also with strength. That is why I refused you, not because you are worthless, but because you are worth more than what you offered. Both of you are. The mother's eyes filled with tears. Her voice trembled. And the woman you loved? What happened to her? The human looked away again, his shoulders heavy. She didn't survive. Her child didn't survive either. That's why I travel now. That's why I carry food. That's why I give when I can. Because I know what it means to have no one. His words sank deep into the mother's heart. She saw the truth in his eyes, the pain that never left him. He wasn't helping out of pity. He was helping out of promise. A vow born from grief. The little girl yawned, curling against her mother's side. Her eyes were half closed, her tiny voice whispering, "Mama, I'm not hungry anymore," before sleep took her. The mother stroked her daughter's hair, her tears falling silently. She looked back at the human, whispering softly, "You've given us more than food, you've given us hope." The human shook his head gently. "Hope is not mine to give, it's yours, you keep it alive. Even in the darkest places, I only gave you the chance to hold it again." The fire burned low, filling the shelter with a warm glow. The mother leaned against the wall, holding her daughter close. Her heart was still heavy with scars, but for the first time in years, it felt like healing was possible. The human sat silently, his blade untouched beside him. His eyes still on the fire, his mind was far away, haunted by memories of the past. But when he looked at the mother and child, sleeping safely for the first time in weeks, something softened in his chest. He whispered to himself, almost too quietly to hear, "This time, it won't end the same," and though no one else heard him, the promise carried through the quiet night. Morning came softly. The first light of dawn slipped through the cracks of the shelter's walls. Casting golden lines across the floor, the fire had burned low during the night. But its warmth still lingered for the first time in weeks. The mother woke not to fear, not to hunger, but to the quiet sound of her daughter breathing peacefully beside her. The little girl stretched, her cheeks not as pale as before. She rubbed her eyes and whispered, "Mama, I dreamed of bread." Her voice carried hope instead of despair. The mother kissed her forehead, tears threatening to fall. "One day, little one, we'll eat bread every morning." The human was already awake. Moving quietly around the shelter, he placed more food on the table, set clean cups beside it, and filled a pot with water. His movements were calm, practiced, like someone who had done this many times before. He didn't speak right away, but his presence filled the room like a steady wall of safety. The mother sat up slowly, still unsure how to act. She had spent so long begging, hiding, fearing. She didn't know how to accept kindness. She looked at him carefully. "You've already given us so much. Why do you still help?" He glanced at her briefly, then returned to preparing the food. "Because you're not done living yet," he said simply. "And neither is she." He nodded toward the girl, who was now smiling faintly, staring at the food with bright eyes. The mother's throat tightened. She helped her daughter sit at the table, guiding her tiny hands as she picked up a cup. The child drank eagerly, then bit into a piece of dried fruit the human had offered. Her laughter filled the room, a soft, gentle sound that made the mother's chest ache with relief. The human sat across from them, finally speaking again. "This isn't charity," he said, his voice steady. "This is survival. And survival is not a gift, it's a right. But survival is only the first step." The mother frowned slightly, unsure. "What do you mean?" He leaned back, folding his arms. "Food and water keep you alive, but dignity, safety, and purpose, that's what gives you a future. I won't just feed you for a night, I'll give you a place, a chance to live without fear." The word stunned her. She had never imagined such a thing for so long. Her world had been only hunger and shame. To think of a future felt impossible, yet here was this human, speaking of it as if it were already waiting for them, her eyes filled with tears. "Why us?" she whispered. "There are many who suffer, why choose us?" The human's eyes grew distant for a moment, shadows flickering behind them. Then he said softly, "Because you asked." Because you didn't give up even when the world mocked you. Even when you had nothing left, you still fought for her. He looked at the little girl, who was now humming quietly as she ate. And she still smiles. That's worth saving. The mother covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking as silent sobs escaped her. It had been so long since anyone had seen worth in her. She pulled her daughter close, whispering, "Do you hear that, my love?" "He says we're worth saving," the little girl giggled, leaning against her mother. "I know, Mama," she said simply. Her innocence made the human's lips twitch in the smallest smile. That day passed quietly, but it was unlike any day they had known before. The human showed them how to clean the shelter, how to build the fire stronger, how to use the small tools he had gathered. The little girl followed him like a shadow, asking questions with wide eyes, laughing when he answered in his gruff but patient voice. The mother watched it all with awe. She had been ready to give herself away for a single meal, but instead she had found not just food, but a home. As night fell again, the three of them sat around the fire. The little girl curled up between them. Already half asleep, the mother whispered softly. "I don't know how to repay you." The human shook his head, staring into the flames. "You don't need to repay me. Just live, raise her strong, that will be enough." The mother nodded slowly, her tears glistening in the firelight. She had begged for one night of mercy, but what she had been given was far greater, a chance at a new beginning. And as the stars shone above the colony, she knew one thing with certainty. The day she met the human was the day hope returned. The days turned into weeks, and the mother began to see something she had not believed in for years: stability. Each morning she woke to the smell of fire and the sight of her daughter smiling. Her child's cheeks grew rounder, her laughter louder. She was no longer weak, no longer fading. She was alive. The human kept his promise. He didn't just feed them, he taught them. He showed the mother how to cook with what little they had, how to mend torn clothing, how to keep the shelter clean and safe. He even taught the little girl how to light the fire with steady hands. She giggled every time the sparks caught flame, shouting, "Mama, look, I can do it!" At night, the three of them would sit around the fire, and for the first time silence felt warm, not empty. The mother would sometimes watch the human quietly, wondering how someone who carried so much pain could still give so much. One evening, as the stars burned bright above the colony, the human sat sharpening his blade again. The mother hesitated, then spoke softly. "You have given us more than food and water. You have given us life again. Why?" The human didn't look up right away. His voice came slow, heavy. "Because I lost everything once and no one was there to stop it. I couldn't save them then, but I can save you now. And maybe that makes the past hurt a little less." The mother lowered her eyes. Her heart ached for him. She understood now his kindness was not weakness. It was strength born from pain. He gave not because he had to, but because he refused to let history repeat itself. The little girl leaned against him that night, her small voice whispering, "Will you stay with us?" The human paused, staring into the flames. Then he placed a hand gently on her head. "I'll stay as long as I'm needed." The mother's tears filled her eyes again, but this time they were not from despair, they were from gratitude, from hope. Word of what the human had done began to spread quietly through the colony. Some mocked him, saying he wasted resources. Others admired him, whispering that he had done what no one else dared. But none of that mattered to him. He wasn't seeking praise, he wasn't seeking thanks. He was simply keeping a promise he had made to himself long ago. Weeks later, he led the mother and child to a new place. Farther from the colony, a small piece of land with a stronger shelter, more space and a small field where food could grow. The mother gasped, holding her daughter's hand tightly. This is for us?" The human nodded. "This is your home now. Not just for a night, not just until the food runs out, but for as long as you live, no one will take this from you." The little girl ran through the small field. Her laughter echoing, she shouted, "Mama, look! We have a house!" Her joy filled the air like music. The mother fell to her knees. Covering her face, she had begged once, ashamed and broken, ready to give herself away for a single meal, but now she had been given something she never thought possible: a future,